Hi all, welcome back to another Final Sector video. Here we are reviewing the first official test, not shakedown, not run around, show off your car, show off your paint, but first proper test. Notably, test a week before we actually get running, so we are getting very close to actually running. There's been plenty going on still, lots to talk about. A lot of changes kind of out of the blue, a lot of changes that we expected, but still a lot to discuss.
Yep.
So, I mean, we hope that there'll be some new parts, some new liveries, and we got both.
Yep.
You know, some teams bringing, as we'll probably go into, massive changes, some's bringing little changes.
Well, I guess we'll start, like before testing even started, let's start with Haas, because Haas looked like they had a pretty average Barcelona test. They had a lot of issues there, and they're like, okay, they needed a good Bahrain test to start with, and then they had a delayed freight, which stopped them, looked like they were going to not run on day one at all, and it's like, well, there's Haas at the back of the grid again, here we go. It turns out it wasn't quite as bad as they thought. They did miss that very first session, but they were allowed to make up time sort of before and after sessions on the other days. They ended up getting, I think, exactly the same amount of running time in the end. So
I think they were initially vying to run on the Sunday, but then a few teams were kind of like, we're not that comfortable with it, because then they get a bit of running each day. So instead they went, okay, do you just want to do a bit more each day? And they're like, okay.
Yeah. And obviously the big news is that Magnussen joins that team, and we weren't sure whether or not he was going to get any running, but they had a seat fit and they got him in for a couple of sessions. So, and he looks like he never left. It's kind of insane, that's fair play. I think that's a good team lineup now. They got the experience of Magnussen, Mick in his second year, and generally, I guess staying on Haas. They had a few little issues here and there, but in terms of like actual track time, they had a lot more. Like those issues didn't really hamper them a huge amount. Generally the car looks a little better than it seemed to in Barcelona as well. So I think they have made a big step forward. Obviously we can't know for sure until next week, but it looks promising for them, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
that was one of the notes that I made. Is there's still a common theme in testing in that you often have no idea where people are, but I think Haas very much random. They could qualify lower half of the top 10, would go, oh cool, they could be last, and would go, oh cool.
Yeah,
it actually could be either.
Yeah,
it's really hard to tell.
Very hard.
But again, they had a few only little issues, but that was kind of common still across the board for testing. But they actually were able to get out there. They were able to take advantage of the extra time they were given, which was good. Good to see it running, and in general, I think good to see cars running. In general, laps were up across the board. There were still a few quite notable talking points in terms of fires and other things going on. I guess if a team was only running a tiny bit at this point, you'd consider it very big warning flags. As we say, we're back to racing next week, so really you want to make sure you know, even if you're running a bit under the power, you can just run consistently, so you know the car's not going to be breaking down as soon as you go out for the race, right?
So the only team that I would say doesn't fit that is McLaren.
Yes, which I guess we can get onto now.
McLaren, they're well and truly on the back foot. They had a really good first test at Barcelona. You know, they were one of the only few that weren't suffering with the porpoising issue. Still not suffering with it, which is great. They had, across all 3 days, they had major brake cooling issues, which even at the end of the test, they brought parts for the third day and they still couldn't fix it.
They apparently brought a lot of parts, and then even like 2 hours into the first session on day 3, they were in there pulling everything apart, and they're kind of like, uh-oh. And it's interesting because even when the topic of the first week was who's suffering from porpoising, it looks like McLaren's got it under control. Oh, but wait, their brakes are completely stuffed, and it's like,
not great.
No.
They're really on the back foot. They said they were bringing more parts for Bahrain, like upgrades for the Bahrain race, even before they thought they'd fix the problem for day 3. And they want to hope that fixes something, because otherwise they're not going to be able to finish the race. They couldn't do any race simulation runs because the brakes would just get too hot, so they had to go out and just do a bunch of short runs. They couldn't really properly test the tires as well across those long runs. They're going to have to, if they can get that fixed for Bahrain Grand Prix, they're going to have to do a lot of that during the practice sessions. It's It's tough. And on top of that, we didn't even talk about the fact that Ricciardo didn't
the second
race
half.
at all. Yeah, Ricciardo got literally 0 track time because he was feeling ill on the first day. So he didn't do anything on the first day. Second day, he was still feeling ill and then returned a positive COVID result. So he's out until... hopefully he's back for the Bahrain Grand Prix.
Hope he's back, yes.
Yeah, he had 0 track time in that second test. So McLaren a little out of sorts.
The fact that they made a big deal of saying on their first and second day, we've got lots of new things to test on, day 3, and hopefully it's going to work. And then we saw day 3 it didn't. So if that's their first attempt at it, you go, well, do they have a second attempt? How much money are they spending on this? Are they going to have to delay other improvements, take money from other areas?
I guess if they can't get it completely fixed, they've just got to hope that maybe it's a bit cooler next week there. But I imagine it's just going to get worse, especially... even though following a car, there's less turbulent air, so it probably won't heat up the brakes and whatnot quite as much. It's going to make following a little difficult because you can't get rid of all that turbulent air. That's just going to make them heat up even worse, and then you start having brake failures, and it's not good.
We've seen brake failures in the past. They're not. We know other teams that have dealt with them. Ferrari, Haas, Mercedes a bit in the past.
Yeah, Haas had big issues in their first couple of years. So
on the other quite notable side is Mercedes. Initially on the first day of testing, and all the teams rolled out their cars to do some promotional shots, and everyone immediately wandered over to the silver car, and they went, what's happened here? Because on most F1 cars, or at least how they're all designed for Spain and in the past few years, have side pods on the side where you generally have 2 big or medium size or whatever vents to funnel air through to cool your car. And Mercedes had effectively shrunk them, squished them into these tiny little things, and they'd almost disappeared. And everyone went, okay.
Yeah. Even the FIA, they spoke to Ross Brawn, is we didn't really expect this.
Yes.
They do seem to think it's legal. Apparently there's going to be a discussion on Tuesday, I think it is, between the technical committee thing, just to make sure that all the parts that were brought to that are part of the regulations or part of the spirit of the regulations or whatever. So, but the initial impressions is that if they wanted to run that, it is completely legal. So
they I think they specifically got Ross Brawn down to the pit lane with I think it was Will Buxton, and he did a little interview for about 15 minutes to just go, hey, everyone wants to know what you think, and he was generally saying it's quite surprising, but it seems to be legal. And in general, I think there's the part of the new system anyways, anything the teams want to submit in advance, they submit the CAD data to the FIA, and apparently they'd already submitted that and looked over it at a high level and said, this is okay. So they've still got to do the due diligence. I think also because it slightly alters the crash structure, and they've done a few little kind of not workarounds, but almost on the line things to satisfy some of that. And there's also talk about how they've mounted their wing mirrors is a little odd too. So I imagine
that was the thing I saw. Yeah. But I guess we'll see. I mean, there was that, and I guess you expected Mercedes to be, they had this radical design, and they've, got all this pace, and it's that car.
The initial fear when you saw it was, they're going to be flying, and they went out there, and immediately it was
okay.
They're
one of the worst in terms of porpoising. They're still struggling up there with Alpine, which I guess we'll get to Alpine in a sec, but they're struggling as one of the worst still with porpoising even through the high speed corners.
Yes, through the corners and going around the right hander, and the slow mo seeing the side of it rocking, and it was
it's not many cars are still doing that. Mercedes is still doing it, and even down coming through that next right hander down that back straight, apparently it's really bad from what people are saying. So it also for the first couple of days looked still really understeery, and it was locking its brake a lot, and although everyone was locking into turn 10, apparently that's but Mercedes more than most. It was just super understeery. In day 3, I think they changed the setup to make it a bit more front end, a bit twitchy, I guess how the Red Bull used to be with Verstappen, where he likes the front end to kind of turn in a bit sharper. But you would watch Russell trying to get that car in, and you have to have two, George Russell is the guy for being super smooth on the inputs, and having 2 stabs at every corner, and it's just couldn't really control it. Which is so uncharacteristic for George. So it seems like they've just given it they just need to get that car rotated, and he's just struggling to try and keep it on
Yep.
the track. I know Hamilton's come out and said they don't think they're going to be challenging for race wins. As is Russell. They seem to think they're really on the back foot. I think Mercedes are well known for saying that they're really bad.
Playing
and then
it
coming
down
out,
a bit and then coming out being half a second quicker.
Yeah, but I mean, genuinely watching that, they don't look comfortable. Neither driver looks comfortable.
No.
It's not like, one driver gets in the car and they're fine and the other driver's just not getting to grips with it. Both drivers just look not comfortable in that car right now. So, but, maybe the updates that they bring, or the tweaks they make for the Bahrain Grand Prix will bring them back.
Again, they've had to run it, right? So it's not like they got to run it in Spain. A lot of other teams seem to bring parts that complemented what they've been running since the start. We saw in Day 3, Red Bull brought almost just like an advanced package of the version it was running. Some people thought, Day 3, are they going to bring their zero concept? But no, they kind of just refined their floor and what they've been working on with their side pods and such.
Yeah.
Well, this is a very different, radical, a whole different concept, basically, right?
Yeah.
Part of it, they were asked if they wanted to label it a B car, and they said, it could be, but we're not labeling it as a B car, but it was kind of in that same vein, right?
Yeah.
But it is interesting how we'll see, normally when you watch like Hamilton out in qualifying, for example, and you see that he's, you almost have to play it in slow-mo to try and find like a single correction or a single thing he's doing. And yet you saw them go out on some of their first push laps, and that's really when the car was such a handful. Like, when they were doing a bit of race runs or on some of the slower tires, they kind of just looked about as slippy as everyone else. But then when they pushed it up to the max, especially compared to the Ferrari and a few other cars we saw, it was a total handful. And normally, I guess qualifying is really where they're strong, right? So it'll be interesting to see Hamilton in that qualifying, trying to push it to the limit, having to correct and try not lock up and really, rather than thinking 3 corners ahead going, these next 3 corners are free, what am I going to do here?
Yeah.
Every point he's thinking, correct here a tiny bit, I'm really looking, this is blown open my excitement for next weekend.
Yeah. I mean, both those Mercedes drivers are particularly George, but well known for their qualifying pace. So it's going to be interesting to see how much they have to try and wrestle that car. I guess speaking of qualifying pace, let's go to Red Bull, because we did mention them. You mentioned their Day 3 package. They were pretty quiet throughout the first couple of days. They were doing, lots of long runs, again, plenty of laps, much like the first test at Barcelona.
No real pushing or kind of lower laps, just a lot of solid running data collecting.
That's it, yeah. It was, they were just kind of there or thereabouts, just getting all their data. And then Day 3, they came out and they made their little tweaks to their side pods and various other things, which I guess is effectively what they want to be their final package. And that car looked like a different beast. It was so good. It was so planted. Yep. There was zero porpoising. It just rotated into all of the corners. Yep. I didn't see it lock. It was just so composed.
Even on its push laps, they went out and did a few push laps, and it looked just as stable as on the slower laps, right?
Yeah. I would say that car probably looks the strongest right now after that Day 3 package. I don't know if it was purposefully them holding back until that Day 3, or if it was actually something they're like, we've seen this and we need to put this on for Day 3 to test it. But regardless, that car... it looks so good. It looks really good.
It looks like what you'd think of maybe like a traditional last day testing Mercedes in previous years, where they might be a bit up in arms and their last day is a bit more solid. And yet in this case, it was kind of the other end.
Everyone is saying that seems to be... It's a little different this year with these cars in that there seems to be a little bit more time found in the slow speed, like the low speed corners as opposed to the high speed corners, just because of the way the ground effect works. They're having to slow right down. So... and from what I could see, it was Mercedes were struggling in those low-speed corners. So if they can, get the low-speed corners right, and if they're really strong in those high-speed corners, then they have a package there, like you said, to get back to the top again.
Those low speed corners, there was a lot of trackside reporting from specifically turn 8 and turn 10, because they sit in that middle speed corners. It's kind of the same. Yes, we see everyone kind of porpoising, but really those 2 corners when you really have to slow down, or you have to get on the power early, or you're braking while turning. Everyone handled that extremely differently, all of the cars, and it's very interesting.
Yeah, you've also got the undulation, like you're going up the hill and then down the hill, and it's just kind of particularly that T10 braking zone, where apparently it caught everyone out.
Great corner for testing.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So, seeing as we're talking about the top teams, let's move on to Ferrari then, because we did mention them. They had another good test, eh? I can't remember a time where they had a problem. Did they have a problem? I don't think they did.
Again, not a massive problem. Again, they had there was still a bit of porpoising there, but no more than I guess I'd say the average.
Yeah.
They're definitely a team that day one came out of the gates, I guess, the most flying. Some teams were in the garage a bit. Some teams were making changes. They seemed to just come out and go, yeah, we're running, and they kind of just kept going. I guess I was saying that Red Bull were quiet, Ferrari were in general quite quiet. But in terms of, I guess, the most, let's say, stable and solid package going into at least the first few races, it still seems to be a case of most people saying they look pretty solid. You know, some people are flying around and having to make some drastic last minute changes. Ferrari kind of like, no, day one we locked in what we wanted and it checked all the boxes, so now we've got a week just to refine it.
Yeah, that's it. The one thing I did see is that Ferrari, while they didn't bring a drastically different package for Bahrain, they did take some little things from McLaren's flaw, I guess because of the porpoising problem. They took little things from McLaren to try and fix that or mitigate it a bit. It makes a lot of sense. They, like you said, they do still have some porpoising. They do still have a little bit of understeer, but both seem manageable right now.
Yes.
And I think that's the big plus that they have. You know, there's teams like Mercedes, and we'll move on to Alpine again. It's not manageable. It's just not good. So yes, a couple of teams do still have to get that under control. I was not expecting as much porpoising as I saw. I thought teams would be focusing really, really hard on getting that fixed. Maybe they did, and it just didn't work. But
I thought what was interesting is, I mean, we saw kind of porpoising across the board in any type of runs at Spain. What was interesting in Bahrain is sometimes you'd see a team go out there and do a handful, like I'm thinking of even AlphaTauri, that go out there and do a few laps, and you go, oh, they're not really porpoising.
And then they'd
do a push lap. They'd do a push lap, and you'd know they were on a push lap because suddenly they were jogging all over the place. There was it was good that this was broadcasted, because we got to see an onboard from Gasly, and because the cameras are stable compared to the driver,
you can see their helmet.
Properly see how much movement they're going through. And even Gasly, I thought on day one was crazy, and then we saw Alonso on day 3, and it looked like he was about to fly out of the car. I was like, oh.
Yeah, man, that Alpine was bad.
When they were on that limit, as I said, they did a few push laps, and on both the back straights, it was like forward, side to side. It was like, how do you look for your braking point when you just see blur? Like, crazy.
It's not great. Alpine are not. I would say they're really on the back foot. The one thing, I would say in general, because I think they were, from what I was reading on the race, they were trackside. They had they were sort of situated at a couple of corners, and every time they saw Alonso in that Alpine come around, sort of T10, T11, he was struggling with understeer as well. So the two big issues, the porpoising and the understeer that we saw from Barcelona, they
seem to be behind on, right?
They seem to be real behind. The one positive is that they were using DRS this time, so they got that fixed.
Yes, we did see that.
The one downside is that even with the DRS open on the main straight, they were still porpoising. So, the DRS is supposed to,
hopefully reduce it a bit, but
I saw them, going down the main straight. The DRS is open, they're still going doof doof doof, and it's just like, oh,
and then you saw it close, and there's a few where they were just smashing sparks everywhere, so it went into the braking zone.
Yeah, imagine. Yeah, I can't imagine them having to do that for a full race distance. Like, how are they going
to be in the heat of battle side by side? Or is it even, I don't know how much they've tested, like while you're porpoising, can you make like erratic movements? Will you just make one in your car or like freak out,
Yeah, that's a good point.
Floor? I don't,
Yeah.
We did see, I'll say as well, while we're talking about that, good segue. We did see a few teams as well doing a bit of following. There was a few kind of mini battles, which seemed just a little petty, like, oh, I locked up and he went around me. But we did see a few drivers, notably, I think it was Gasly and Hamilton on day 3, were kind of taking a few turns behind each other to try and see how that, I guess, part of the overheating would be a big thing. I guess, especially for Mercedes, considering they've revised their cooling package, they want to run behind someone to say, hey, does this, are we stuffed here or not? General comment, I guess, on the overtaking kind of thing seemed to be the same we mentioned in Spain.
And the slipstream effect doesn't seem quite as advanced. Even with DRS, like I saw even with DRS open, it was still, down that main straight, it was still a little bit of a struggle to get past. Like it's not, they're not just absolutely flying past, which
I think is better than it being too easy. They have to make a rash change to try and fix it.
I absolutely prefer. I would much rather see close running, like going, right behind one another, all the way around the track fighting, and rather than just like, they get a bit close and straight past with DRS. It's like
either
cool.
straight past or they have to back off because their car's overheating.
Yeah,
so if they can stay there, as we said in our last review, we just want to see that, right? One guy right behind another for a few laps, pressuring him, throwing a few dummies.
Yeah,
brilliant. We're happy.
Yeah. A little bit more thought into the overtaking. That's kind of a little bit more racecraft. It's what we want.
We haven't talked about Williams that much in terms of when we were saying about big issues. They were probably the most visible big issue.
Yeah.
Quite a big fire there. Latifi had to come out, be fireman Latifi.
Good man.
It was interesting.
Doing his civic duty, yeah.
For the team. Just like, gotta save the money, save the bits. It was interesting how it wasn't super known what caused it. I mean, it was a rear brake fire, but it wasn't like they were kind of running and suddenly it was overheated. There seemed to be word that almost
it was a procedural issue.
They'd like left the car on in the garage. They didn't cool it properly in the garage, something like that. And they basically came out, and then allegedly the rear suspension, the brakes just melted. So the rear of the car just went.
Yeah. So, that's what I heard said as well. Like from what it seems like, it was just like a real procedural issue in the garage that was like nothing to do with actual. It's not like McLaren where their brakes are actually overheating. It's just, I think they just had them running too hot when he came out of the garage, and it quite literally melted suspension components and caused a big failure. It's not not fantastic. It limited their running, I think, to 12 days. 12 days. 12 days of 12 laps of running on the first day.
They lost 12 days of running. They had no money. No money to replace the parts.
No, that's it.
They'll be back in Australia. They're missing the first 2 Grand Prix.
Oh my goodness. 12 laps of running on that first day. So that was not great for them.
It was the biggest impact,
So...
And I guess in their favor, it wasn't, as you say, a McLaren brake issue. It was an operational error, but still a bit oops.
It's not great,
And it's gonna, as you say, it is relevant to actually say it is gonna hurt their wallet a bit too. Even little things like that will
good
be
point.
A fairly costly,
reordering
of those parts, because so much of it was kind of burnt up. So
not great.
And the fire extinguisher, a good maybe
of course.
£50 for that one.
Yeah. Absolutely. The other thing I wanted to mention on Williams as well is even on day 3, we obviously talked about how everyone was locking up at T10. Latifi, it was like every lap or every second lap he was locking up into T10. I don't know if that's just because Latifi's still trying, he's just maybe coming in a bit too hot, or if that car is still just struggling with under rotation and getting that car slowed down properly. But even all the way to the end of day 3, that Williams it did not like that corner. Every other team seemed to at least find a way to get through it without locking up quite as much. Williams just didn't seem to. They were struggling.
You wonder if it might be because Williams seems to have said is almost the most likely to also do the slim compact side pod design.
They had a very similar one.
You almost wonder if it might be that type of, I don't know how, but that type of packaging causes issues. I guess if we're looking at the Merc, I mean, there's only 2 teams to look at there, but I still thought it was interesting in the comments with some saying it's not an impossibility in a few races they might try the package as well, considering they're running the Mercedes unit and everything, right?
That's it.
That'd be interesting, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think Williams have admitted that they're probably going to be starting on the back foot going into the first race as well, so I think the potential is there. I would have expected them to be a bit further ahead than they were, though. So maybe they can prove me wrong, but I would see them starting more towards the back, unfortunately.
But we still hope less starting in a back marker position and more just like rear of the midfield, right? Some of these, I don't think anyone's really that far off, unless I guess they just have to purposely run, I don't know, significantly overweight or with some really bad setup just so they can actually run. I guess as an overall theme here, I still think, although we don't really know the order, there might still be like a little category of drivers ahead in like a front pack, but I think
and then the midfield's a bit more,
that really could be anywhere at this point. I mean, even some cars that might look a bit more stable, but we still don't know if maybe they're only running stable because they're being safe, right? And other teams I've seen with Haas, right, seems to be only running here and there, but then when they do run, they're actually looking quite well developed and quick.
I was speaking on that last point as well. Alfa Romeo, I would throw into that category. That car, when it doesn't have gearbox issues and getting stuck in gear, which apparently happened twice throughout the weekend.
I didn't I missed that.
It's looking pretty good, actually. It looks really, really responsive. I think they were one of the ones that had they were on the weight limit, which I guess helps with that rotation and the braking and slowing down of the car. They have a short wheelbase apparently, which again helps that a little bit more. And they had a lot more running at Barcelona than they did.
I was going to say a lot more running.
Considering,
a lot more of them. You could actually see them as well because they weren't in camouflage.
Of course,
so you could actually spot them.
Yeah. They had nice bright colors this time. So, but yeah, no, that car, I was surprised to see how good it looked on the track. Yeah, I expected them to be sort of more towards the back, but I'm not so sure now after seeing that. I just hope that, maybe they don't have those gearbox failures. That came right at the end of day 3 as well. That still had that gearbox issue. Apparently they are making their own gearboxes. It's not coming from
they didn't
Ferrari.
Take the Ferrari package,
Is hoping that it's not a big issue and something that they can get fixed. Otherwise, they're gonna.
Or maybe you hope they were like stress testing something almost like
maybe
expected result, right? You kind of think, okay, if it happened there at the end of the day, maybe they went, let's try this and see if it does something.
So, but yeah, no, I was relatively impressed by Alfa Romeo. So, I think that kind of feeds more into the fact that I think there's going to be less of the back markers and more of that midfield. Just lots of cars in that midfield, and it could be just race by race, circuit by circuit, where people are strong. Or
I think the main ones we haven't really touched on is AlphaTauri and Aston Martin. I guess I grouped them together, where at times they looked pretty good, but then at other times they looked all over the shop. In terms of really not knowing where they are, it seems like they can run in a mode which they're quite happy, but they obviously have a lot more potential over that mode, right?
I don't think either of them have showed their full hand either. I think that neither of them have done like proper like low fuel push runs. They've kind of been running their own little thing again. They've been really quiet and just kind of pumping in the laps. I think the only issues that I saw, Vettel had that big brake by wire issue on day 1 where he had the big lockup, but they got that cleared up and it seemed more or less okay for the rest of the tests.
The vibe seemed to be that it did seem one of the harder cars to drive at kind of those lower corners, but Vettel, I think, apparently somehow found a way to manage it.
Absolutely. And then again from the race, when they were trackside, they were saying that the AlphaTauri seems to be struggling with like chronic understeer and locking into T10 as well, which if you were watching them, they were, again, also one of those that were sort of struggling in T10 all the way through day 3. So outside of that, I didn't really get anything from AlphaTauri or Aston Martin. That was all I could glean because no one talked about them and they were just sort of doing their own thing. So no real big issues outside of that, like I said, that Aston brake by wire issue. I mean, all in all, it was a real interesting test. It was good to actually finally see the cars being driven ourselves rather than just relying on like correspondence, eyewitnesses, and some photos and the occasional video. It's kind of put into perspective where we sort of see all the teams, I think. So I think it's going to be a very intriguing first race because I think there's still a lot of unknowns.
And they don't have a lot of time to go back to base to manufacture some new parts. You know, from the Saturday night that they finished, they've only got how many days it'll be? 5-6 days basically, right? Until they're back out on track for morning practice 1.
Yeah, that's it. So not a lot of time. So you want to hope that's why it's big for McLaren, the fact that they haven't got it fixed. You know, teams that have actual like big issues at the end of day 3, very much on the back foot. So but it'll be interesting. Stay tuned for our Bahrain Grand Prix preview. We'll go into a bit more depth of what we expect coming up for the race and our predictions of who we think is going to do well. But thanks for watching, and we'll see you for the next video. Bye-bye.
Ciao.